Leonard Kevin Len Bias was a first-team All-American college basketball forward at the University of Maryland. He was selected by the Boston Celtics as the second overall pick in the 1986 NBA draft on June 17, and died 2 days later from cardiac arrhythmia induced by a cocaine overdose. He is considered by some sportswriters to be one of the greatest players not to play at the professional level. A statue was proposed to be created in his honor in 2013. Early years: Bias was born in Landover, Maryland. He was known to friends and family by his childhood nickname Frosty. He was given the nickname by his good friend and pastor Reverend Gregory Edmond because he was tall and cool and quiet and unassuming. College career: from Landover, Maryland, Bias graduated from Northwestern High School in Hyattsville, Maryland, and subsequently attended the University of Maryland. As a freshman, he was viewed as raw and undisciplined, but developed himself over time into an All-American player. In his junior year, he led the Atlantic Coast Conference in scoring and was named the ACC's Player of the Year. His senior season was highlighted by his performance in an overtime victory against top-ranked North Carolina in which he scored 35 points, including 7 in the last 3 minutes of regulation and 4 in overtime. At the end of the year, Bias collected his second ACC Player of the Year award and was named to 2 All-America teams. Bias impressed basketball fans with his amazing leaping ability, his physical stature and his ability to create plays, and was considered one of the most dynamic players in the nation. By his senior year, scouts from various National Basketball Association teams viewed Bias as the most complete forward in the class of 1986. According to Celtics scout Ed Badger, he's maybe the closest thing to Michael Jordan to come out in a long time. "I'm not saying he's as good as Michael Jordan, but he's an explosive and exciting kind of player like that." Jordan was then in his second professional season with the Chicago Bulls. NBA selection and overdose: on June 17, Bias was selected by the defending NBA champion Celtics as the second overall pick in the 1986 NBA draft, which was held in New York City at Madison Square Garden. Arnold "Red" Auerbach, as the Boston Celtics president and general manager, had previously dealt guard Gerald Henderson and cash to the Seattle Supersonics for the pick in 1984. After the draft, Bias and his family returned to their suburban Maryland home. On June 18, Bias and his father flew to Boston, Massachusetts, from Washington, D.C., for an NBA club draft acceptance and product endorsement signing ceremony with the Celtics coaches and management. Bias had discussions with Reebok's sports marketing division regarding a 5-year endorsement package worth $1.6 million. After returning home to Maryland, Bias retrieved his newly leased sports car and drove back to his room on the campus of the University of Maryland. He then dined with some teammates and a member of the football team. He left campus at approximately 2 a.m. on June 19 and drove to an off-campus gathering, which he attended briefly before returning to his dorm in Washington Hall at 3 a.m. It was at this time that Bias and some friends used cocaine. According to the campus timeline, Bias had a seizure and collapsed sometime between 6:25 and 6:32 a.m. while talking with teammate Terry Long. At 6:32 a.m., when the 911 call to Prince George's County Emergency Services was made by Brian Tribble, Bias was unconscious and not breathing. All attempts by the emergency medical team to restart his heart and breathing were unsuccessful. After additional attempts to revive him in the emergency department at Leland Memorial Hospital in Riverdale, Maryland, Bias was pronounced dead at 8:55 a.m. of a cardiac arrhythmia related to usage of cocaine. It was reported that there were no other drugs or alcohol found in his system after his death. 4 days after his death, more than 11,000 people packed the Caulfield House, the university recreation and student center where Bias played for the Terrapins, for a memorial service. Those speaking at the service included Red Auerbach, who said he had planned for 3 years to draft Bias for the Celtics. Auerbach added that the city of Boston had not been so shocked since the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Bias is buried in Lincoln Memorial Cemetery in Suitland, Maryland. On June 30, 1986, the Celtics honored Bias with their own memorial service, giving his never-used number 30 Celtic jersey to his mother, Lonnie's. Trial. On July 25, 1986, a grand jury returned indictments against Bias's friend Brian Tribble for possession of cocaine and possession of cocaine with intent to distribute, and Bias's Maryland teammates Terry Long and David Gregg. Long and Gregg were both suspended from the team on July 31. All three defendants entered not guilty pleas in August. On October 20, 1986, prosecutors dropped all charges against Long and Gregg in exchange for their testimony against Tribble. On October 30, the grand jury added 3 more indictments against Tribble: 1 count of conspiracy to obstruct justice and 2 counts of obstruction of justice. Also on October 30, Kenneth Mark Fobbs, Tribble's roommate, was charged with perjury for allegedly lying to the grand jury about the last time he saw Tribble. The state ultimately dropped the perjury charges against Fobbs on March 24, 1987, and a jury acquitted Tribble of all charges related to the Bias case on June 3, 1987. In October 1990, following a 2-year undercover sting operation, Tribble pleaded guilty to being a major drug dealer. He cooperated with the government and so was not sentenced until October 15, 1993. He was sentenced to 10 years and 1 month of confinement. In 1988, the U.S. Congress passed a stricter anti-drug act that is known as the Len Bias law. It was backed by both parties and reinforced the war on drugs with stiffer penalties and expanded the DARE program. University of Maryland. The circumstances surrounding Bias's death threw the University of Maryland and its athletics program into turmoil. An investigation revealed that Bias was 21 credits short of the graduation requirement despite having used all his athletic eligibility. On August 26, 1986, State's Attorney Arthur A. Marshall Jr. stated that in the hours after Bias's death, Maryland head basketball coach Lefty Driesell told players to remove drugs from Bias's dorm room. 2 days later, Bias's father, James, accused the University of Maryland, and Driesell specifically, of neglecting the academic status of its athletes. The National Collegiate Athletic Association subsequently began its investigation into the affair that fall. The controversy prompted athletic director Dick Dull to resign October 7, 1986, with Driesell following suit October 29, after serving as the Terrapins coach for 17 years. The grand jury presiding over the Bias case issued a final report on February 26, 1987, that criticized the University of Maryland's athletic department, admissions office, and campus police. J. Bias. On December 5, 1990, Bias's younger brother, James Stanley J. Bias III, a promising young basketball talent, was shot to death at age 20 following a dispute in the parking lot of Prince George's Plaza, a Hyattsville shopping mall located just a few miles from the University of Maryland. 2 gunmen, Jerry Tyler and Gerald E. Ireland, had fired several times into the vehicle Jay and 2 friends were in, and Jay was shot twice in the back. He was pronounced dead at the same hospital where Len Bias had died, and was buried next to him at Lincoln Memorial Cemetery. Tyler and E. Ireland were both found guilty of murdering J. Bias. Parents. Following their sons' deaths, James and Lonnie's Bias assumed vocal advocacy roles. Lonnie's became an anti-drug lecturer, while James became an advocate for handgun control. Films. A film about Bias's life, directed by Kirk Fraser, was promoted at the 2008 Sundance Film Festival and was released June 19, 2009. The documentary Without Bias premiered on ESPN on November 3, 2009, as part of their 30 for 30 documentary series, commemorating the network's 30th anniversary. Notes and references. Weinrabe, Michael. The Day Innocence Died. ESPN. Archived from the original on March 30, 2014. Further reading, Brocher, Drew. Death of a Legend, Washingtonian, June 1, 2009. Abel, Greg. It Was 20 Years Ago Today, Pressbox, June 14, 2006.